Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely wild story from 1990. Picture this, the U.S. Secret Service raiding a small board game company. We're going to unpack exactly how the fallout from that raid and the landmark 1993 court case that followed completely shaped the digital rights that you and I rely on every single day. It's a crazy story of colliding worlds, a government totally baffled by early cyberspace, and an accidental fight for the future of digital communication. Let's get into it.
So, let's drop right into March of 1990 to set the scene here. Imagine you're running a quiet little tabletop role-playing game publishing company down in Texas. Suddenly, boom, armed Secret Service agents are literally kicking down your doors. And here's the kicker. They're not there looking for counterfeit money or financial fraud. No, their primary target is a sci-fi manuscript for an upcoming game. I know, it sounds completely unbelievable, but it actually happened. You see, the government's perspective at the time was, well, incredibly literal. The feds genuinely viewed this tabletop role-playing game as an actual cyber threat matrix. They were looking at a fictional game manual, something meant for rolling dice and just playing pretend with your friends, and they actually believed it was a real-world, step-by-step handbook for committing serious cybercrimes. At the heart of this whole fiasco was just a massive, massive disconnect in technological comprehension. You have to remember, in 1990, the digital frontier was evolving so fast. Early hacker communities, dial-up modems, it was moving at lightning speed. In federal law enforcement, they were just struggling to keep pace. They were basically trying to take old, physical, analog rules of search and seizure and forcibly apply them to the brand new world of cyberspace.
Okay, to really understand how that disconnect played out in real time, we've got to look at the spark for this entire raid. It all kicked off when a hacker managed to steal a completely mundane administrative document from Bell South. It was known as the E911 document. The hacker takes this file, posts it online to an underground digital network, and chaos ensues. But here's the thing. These weren't nuclear launch codes. It was literally just an administrative telecommunications manual. But corporate security and the Secret Service absolutely panicked. They falsely placed a staggering $80,000 value on this leaked E911 document. They were utterly convinced that this was a highly critical blueprint, one that could be used to completely dismantle the entire 911 emergency system. They viewed this leak as a monumental threat to national security, and they were desperate to track down anyone, and I mean anyone associated with it.
And that desperation led investigators to follow digital breadcrumbs across what was known as a BBS. Now, just for some modern context, a BBS, or bulletin board system, was essentially an early electronic hub. Think of it as a sort of proto-internet forum where users would hook up their dial-up modems to share files and message each other. Well, the digital breadcrumbs from that leaked document on one of these boards led the feds straight to a guy named Lloyd Blankenship. Now, this is where a critical and honestly kind of hilarious conflation of identities happens. Yes, Blankenship was a known figure in hacker circles, and he ran his own private BBS. But his actual day job? He was a writer for Steve Jackson Games. Specifically, he was writing a brand new tabletop RPG manual called GURPS Cyberpunk. The investigators completely blurred the lines. They mixed up his off-site personal hobby with his corporate day job. Because of this massive confusion, that GURPS Cyberpunk manuscript was seized as a highly dangerous asset. To put the government's mindset into perspective here, critics of the raid famously compared it to the police arresting a Dungeons & Dragons player because they genuinely thought a fantasy spellbook could cast real fireballs. It just brilliantly illustrates the sheer inability of the government at the time to differentiate between a sci-fi game and reality. But the real-world consequences of that raid, they were absolutely devastating for Steve Jackson Games. During that March operation, the Secret Service seized all their computers. They took all the hard drives. They hauled away the printers that were absolutely essential to their daily publishing. But worst of all, they seized the company's entire BBS server. And in the process, the government read and permanently deleted 162 private emails belonging to non-employee users. The whole ordeal pushed this innocent company right to the brink of bankruptcy.
So obviously, Steve Jackson Games wanted to fight back. But when they sought legal help, they hit a massive brick wall. Traditional civil rights groups at the time just couldn't conceptualize digital publishing. Existing legal advocates were honestly almost as technologically illiterate as the federal agents. They just didn't have a framework to understand that seizing a digital server was actually a massive First Amendment issue involving freedom of speech and the press. And this is a crucial turning point in the story. Because of this exact technological blind spot, people who actually understood the early internet realized they had to step up. Prominent tech leaders jumped in and formally created the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or the EFF. They formed this organization specifically to fund this lawsuit and defend our digital civil liberties. Now, as the lawsuit finally progressed to trial in 1993, a completely wild detail came to light about that E911 document that sparked the whole raid. You know, the one they thought was an $80,000 national security threat? Yeah, instead of being highly classified, it turned out the document was completely public. Anyone, literally anyone, could order it from a standard administrative catalog for about 15 bucks. Just incredible irony. So, the entire warrant was built on a phantom threat. That leaves us with a totally fascinating legal puzzle for the courts. Think about it. If cop sees a physical filing cabinet, law enforcement generally gets to open it up and read the paper files inside. But what on earth happens with a digital server that's storing private communications for hundreds of third-party users? How do you protect digital rights when all the laws on the books were written for paper and filing cabinets? The judge really had their work cut out for them. They had to figure out how to apply these old analog concepts to cyberspace. The court specifically looked at the Privacy Protection Act, which deals with something called prior restraint. This is a legal concept that was originally designed to stop the government from censoring publishers by seizing a newspaper's physical printing press. To solve this modern dilemma, the judge made what was a huge historic logical leap for the time. The court ruled that a digital server essentially holds the exact same legal status as a physical printing press. Therefore, taking a digital server is legally no different whatsoever than slapping a padlock on the front door of a newspaper office. It was a massive new line drawn in the digital sand. Furthermore, the court ruled that the government explicitly violated the Stored Communications Act by reading and deleting those 162 private emails, and this established an absolutely vital precedent. Getting a warrant to seize computer hardware is not a blank check to just go on a fishing expedition through private, third-party communications stored on that device.
So let's bring this right back to you and me. Basically, every single time you open your private inbox today, on your laptop, your phone, whatever, and you feel secure knowing that law enforcement needs a highly specific warrant to read your stored emails, you essentially have a sci-fi tabletop game to thank for that. The constitutional protections guarding your digital inbox today exist because a small game company got pushed around and decided to fight back.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to mull over. If our foundational internet privacy laws were shaped by a 1990 misunderstanding of a sci-fi board game, what current government misunderstandings of emerging technologies, like, say, AI or decentralized networks, are quietly writing the laws of our future right now? Are we still just arresting the wizard for his fireball spellbook? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the reality behind the rules.